a panel. We will have a panel. I'll see how many panelists are remaining. One little theme emerging in our meeting is their frequent disappearance, these panelists. But from my latest count, we do have some panelists. So without much ado, ladies and gentlemen, the keynote speaker this afternoon will be Mr. Daniel Njiwa, who is the Director of Regional Food and Trade and Market Issues at the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa in Nairobi. Welcome, Daniel. And once Daniel has given his keynote presentation, we will have a panel of discussants. Please take a seat first. We will have a panel of discussants to dissect, put additional perspectives to what the keynote presenter will share with us. I would also like, therefore, to call upon the panelists to also come forward. Number one, we have Mr. Martin Waria, who is an independent food systems expert. Martin, I am sure you are here. Okay. All of us remember Martin from his very important work all over the continent in this area of food systems. Next, as Martin comes forward, we have Miss Antaria Rumba, the Director of Business Competitiveness at Trademark Africa. Antaria. Miss Antaria Rumba from Trademark Africa has successfully disappeared. Okay, yeah. Then, yeah, okay. She was here. Anyway, next, Dr. He just taught me how to pronounce this, now it's all gone. Dr. Hemon Sengamina, who is the Secretary General of ASO. I just saw you, I know you are here. Welcome. The Secretary General of the African Regional Standards Organization, ASO, welcome. Yeah, that's the last panelist. Okay, I think we are done because, yeah, Antaria has disappeared. Dingiswell Shower is not here, so we are fine, okay? We have one keynote presenter and we will have two panelists to dissect and present additional inputs and engage with your colleagues on this very important topic of boosting intra-African trade in agricultural commodities and services. So without much ado, it is now my deepest honor and pleasure to call upon the Director for Regional Food Trade and Markets at the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa, Mr. Daniel Njiwa, to give us his keynote presentation. Daniel, welcome.
Thanks a lot, Chris. I've known Chris for easily 20 years now. I would actually, refer to him as one of the grandfathers of CADIP. And nice to share the panel also with colleagues, Martin, and also the DG of ARSO, who we have interacted with quite a lot. So yeah, my name is Daniel Njiwa. I hope I keep you as excited as possible, having come from lunch. Must admit that sitting in business class is feeling a little weird. I was one of the panelists and suddenly upgraded to become a keynote speaker. So hopefully we keep each other excited. Our technology, is it working? If that was me, then it's working. Thanks a lot. So I just wanted to try and open up a few spaces and maybe be a little provocative in this conversation. I really am passionate about trade, in particular agriculture trade. No wonder I'm sitting in this position in Agra, but I must admit that even with a lot of effort that all of us sitting in the room, very little is changing. In some cases, a little disappointing. But importantly, we must remember that trade will remain the lubricant for our conversations around, African food systems. It encourages production, not just production of any crop, but production really in a diversified fashion where, you could easily meet, food security, but also nutrition targets. It stimulates economic growth at country level, but also improves incomes for our smallholder farmers, through market access and provision of, goods that are demanded at the market. But this is not, to happen without challenges. Obviously, our trade environment in the continent has been, faced with a lot of challenges, but to a large extent, challenges that can be dealt with. Issues to do with policy and predictability, countries deciding without numbers, without evidence, how to deal with, import and export policies, issues to do with non-tariff barriers. Dr. Usman Badiani will tell you that's the single biggest challenge that agriculture trade faces in the continent, and many others. Things like infrastructure, just to get goods from one corner to another is a big problem. And if you look at this more closely, you find that the continent, often remains exposed to shocks, exposed to, different sorts of changes that affect eventually food security and exposing at least, as we are speaking now, 250, 280 million people to food insecurity. The graph you're looking at is actually showing a very interesting trend where up until, our leaders sat down at the Malabo Declaration and committed themselves to do better in trade, we were actually seeing a positive trend in African agricultural exports and maybe even imports. Intra-regional trade was pretty much, on a steady rise. But soon after, the situation is looking rather, gloom. If I have to borrow Haddad's words. But if you look closely at the countries, if we can go to the next slide, at the performance of our countries, it's actually even more gloomy, yeah? Haddad said not everything is gloomy, I agree, but this is way gloomy because 2017, our map was actually green in terms of, the targets that we have to meet for intra-African agriculture trade. 2019, the reds, purple started popping up. 2021 is almost like everybody has forgotten what they committed, what they signed up to, and only 4 countries still remain on track. Of course, behind these numbers, there's some positives. We see a lot, more in terms of volume value of trade happening. But at the broader level, we should have been doing much better to remain on track. And this is really a challenge for all of us, challenge for governments, challenge for private sector, challenge for our development partners, in order to try and change the face of how we're performing in that space. Remember, we cannot achieve food security, we cannot achieve economic growth and market or food systems resilience if our trade is not functioning very well. But what's broken beyond issues to do with NTBs, infrastructure, and all of this? Surely there's something that's also not working right. And we pulled up a few things here. One is, the issue of productivity. So we are still stagnating, at least for some of the major cereals, like maize, averaging, around 1.7 metric tons. When the benchmark out there, globally, they are over 5 tons. Looking at trade, the continent is, still importing net imports of at least 50 billion in food. $50 billion. And yet our target should be 0. I mean, essentially, that's a massive amount of money that could be used elsewhere. Issues of infrastructure, paved roads. We're talking of, an average of, 31 kilometers versus 134. Arable land under irrigation, 6% versus world averages of 20. And government expenditure in agriculture. Remember the commitment in the Malabo commitment that governments should at least put, 10%. We're still, very, very low on that metric. Importantly, it's around research and development, which is really a driver of growth. Just to visualize, what this 50 billion on the next slide looks like. On the left-hand side, you're looking at our attempt in unpacking what this 50 billion is like. And here we didn't pay much attention to the crops and livestock specifically, just broadly, the major crops and livestock that form that 50 billion. Easily 28 billion in North Africa, largely for imports of, wheat, maybe soy. Sub-Saharan Africa, 22 billion. But if we look closely just in the 4 staple crops of wheat, rice, maize, and soya, which are easily our major calorie contributors, we have Sub-Saharan Africa at about 18 billion annually in 2021 and 16 in North Africa. But here's an interesting picture on the right-hand side of the slide. Things like maize. We are almost neutral, trade neutral, in terms of that's Sub-Saharan Africa only. It looks like, with a few adjustments, we could actually produce more than, what we need. Same is with, root and tubers, things like meat, other meat and tea. But the worrisome, sector is where we are still net importers of things like wheat, rice, soybeans, or soybean products. Countries like Zambia have invested quite a lot in the wheat sector, and we must commend them. Ethiopia are doing very well in wheat, almost approaching, national self-sufficiency. Those are models that we should be looking at, and we should be considering those lessons to see how we can, produce slightly more to export to our neighbors. Soybean, which is an increasingly, important crop, an industrial crop for that matter, a source of protein for animals through animal feed, but also getting, edible oils, an important crop that we also need to put, more effort in, and perhaps even the animal products like poultry, eggs, we shouldn't be importing such. This is really something that we can do. Further, painting that picture. In the next slide here, we're looking at really a problem that will continue to bog us down with a business as usual strategy. If we don't change in the way we behave, in the way we invest in the sector, the pace at which production is moving versus consumption, the gap will continue to widen. From 2020, looking at, those 4 crops, the gap was probably around, 34 million tons. In another 10 years, that's gonna almost, double to 55 million or even more, depending on, how population moves and how demand moves. That's just, to joke your brain and be provocative. The next one is a picture of our map of Africa, literally showing, if we can move to the next slide. Okay. Here, I also try to, put side by side a map of Africa showing, basically our production zones or centers of demand, and another map that's been drawn from, Yale's knowledge portal showing, the prevalence of national disasters. You can easily see that our natural disasters are actually mapped closely to areas of, production. What is the point that I want to share with you here? We hardly talk about, the importance of climate to the extent that we put serious effort and investment in those spaces that really matter. As we were discussing and developing some of these illustrations at Agra, our plan was, where do we see the highest potential of food baskets in Africa? And easily, it is the same areas where we have the highest population densities. And it is the same areas where we have, existing infrastructure, seemingly, rail and road. It is also the same areas where you have, largely the water basins of the continent. But if you pair it with the map in the middle, it is also the same areas that are hardest hit, by a frequent recurrent of, natural disasters. What does it say? As we put more effort in building bread baskets, we need to put as equal effort in addressing climate shocks. Investments in infrastructure, investments in technology, investments in, different kinds of approaches that help mitigate, the impacts of climate change if we are to secure those bread baskets and be able to feed areas that are worse off. The next slide is a World Bank analysis. There's always a cost of inaction. So we can choose. Let's stay quiet and continue with the business as usual, throwing in 2% in research and development. And what happens? Water management. As per World Bank analysis, the cost of adaptation is just 6 billion. But the cost of inaction is 90 billion. For research, it's 3 billion versus 70 billion. For land restoration and planning, 3 billion versus 26 billion. Infrastructure, including, increased access to roads, railways, and what have you, easily, 2 billion by their estimates. 13 billion is a cost. Some of this, if you total it up, you come to about 200 billion as a cost of inaction for you not addressing climate change in African food systems. The other issue that we often forget to talk about, and I'm going to wrap up now, is the issue of nutrition. So even as you can see from my presentation, we are basically talking, cereals, staples, and what have you. We're not talking much, vegetables. We're not talking much fruits. We're not talking much all the nutrient-dense, products that are out there. But I think Dr. Haddad did a good job, and I think this is an area that we need to also, invest all our efforts, to ensure we have addressed the nutrition angle sufficiently. But nutrition is not just, diversification or production or making available food that's got, high nutrient content, but it's also about, how safe that food is. It is not food unless it is safe, so they say. So you can have your, mangoes, avocado, but if they are contaminated, if your groundnuts has higher aflatoxin levels, maize, that even poses a much, higher risk to human consumption and therefore nutrition. So in all of the efforts that we want to, be talking about, investing in, we should keep nutrition as really a cross-cutting angle for our work, starting with policy and investments. In conclusion, I just want to remind us about a few things which are very obvious to most of us in here, but I think we don't put that much seriousness in addressing. So to our countries, to the leaders, officials that are in here in the room, improving the trade policy regulatory environment is probably something that is very critical and something that is within your control. There are a number of partners in the room that are, open to working with governments, including AGRA, to help address the elimination of non-tariff barriers to agriculture food trade in the continent, to help address some of the policy impediments, decisions that are made in a vacuum or lack of data. There are facilities, there are tools that could help that. And I think we should put deliberate effort, to get that right. It is the single most important issue. The ACFTA, which presents a massive opportunity for market access, are currently working on, supporting regional strategic value chains. This is very important to spur industrialization of food products. If we can all rally around some of these, priorities that have been set, we should be able to start to realistically address, food security challenges and nutrition challenges in the region. Inclusivity. Looking at the numbers, at least in sub-Saharan Africa, the small, the women, the youth are probably the most important players in agriculture. They are probably supplying over 70% of the labor. They are involved in moving over 80% of the total volume of food produced and traded in the continent, or at least in the sub-Saharan Africa. Most of them are involved even in informal cross-border trade, which is estimated actually to be actually more significant, and in some cases more than formal trade of agriculture products. We need to find a way to get to work with women, to get to work with the youth, provide them with the necessary tools, the enabling environment for them to participate more efficiently and effectively. Collaborations, partnerships, and dialogue. Perhaps another important area that we need to look at. If we don't work with each other, I don't think they say there's a saying, if you want to go far, you have to go with someone, right? If you want to go fast, you have to go alone, something like that. So I think we have all the right partners with all the good intentions in the room and maybe outside. AGRA's DNA is founded around, alliance building, catalytic and leverage, building synergies between organizations to deliver the common good, but also achieve impact. I implore upon all of us to, use the same mantra. I cannot emphasize more the issue of climate risks and the investments that we need. And neither can I, emphasize more the issue of nutrition through food diversification, food safety, and trade. Thank you for listening. I'll end it here.
Oh, yeah. Am I being picked from here or this one doesn't work? I think it works here. Thank you very much, Daniel. And we'll come back now to the panel. Thank you very much for those very wonderful perspectives. Where you have clearly indicated that so many years down the line, despite our commitment to boost intra-regional trade in Malabo, we still have challenges as a continent. Some of the key challenges still remaining include productivity. Productivity on the continent still a challenge. You indicate here, on average, still a figure of 1.7 tons per hectare on some of our cereals, compared to a global average of around 5 tons per hectare. You also indicate that the state of our infrastructure is still poor. Specifically related to agriculture, you highlight the fact that we haven't undertaken enough effort to develop the irrigation sector. You highlight that point, and still there are question marks in terms of the important area of expenditure, overall expenditure in agriculture. Many countries are still struggling, and as a result, you still highlight that disease of ours, the $50 billion that we are still spending every year importing food from outside this continent, despite our land, water, and people endowment. We are still spending $50 billion every year to bring food into this continent, mainly wheat, rice, maize, soya. And you indicate, a keynote presenter, that apart from these challenges, we also still have the matter of climate change to deal with, okay? And that we need to do more. We need to do more to promote nutrition-sensitive policies. So thank you very much. I think one key point you indicated there, among the many good points you highlighted in your conclusion, that to promote nutrition, in particular on our continent, critical to focus on the matter of food diversification, both quality and quantity, okay, for the continent, for us to have improved outcomes on nutrition on the continent. So once again, I think, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our keynote presenter, Mr. Daniel Njua. And at this point, I think it's now opportune to now invite our panelists to also offer their perspectives on the keynote presentation, on the topic at hand. We have two panelists, Mr. Martin Waria, who is an independent food systems expert, and Dr. Herman Sengamina, the Secretary General of ASO. Gentlemen, who would want to go first? Okay. Yeah.
we can speak from here, can we?
Thank you very much, Martin. Welcome for volunteering to go first. Okay.
No, you didn't answer my question.
And you can speak from here indeed. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. And it's good to be back, to be in this space. It's kind of familiar, but is actually very important space, very important platform in terms of not just sharing ideas, but as opposed galvanizing the energy, the efforts into what should translate into action. And this is why my intervention is going to relate more and more towards implementation, results, and impact. If the keynote that we've just heard and what we are sharing here in these 2-3 days doesn't translate into tangible impact on what we do, how we do it, then probably accounting to the people out there, we should agree that we are wasting their resources to bring us here and have this conversation. So I want to underline the fact that it's not somebody out there, it's actually every one of us individually, collectively, to be reflecting in the context of what should I do, what should I be doing or not doing in terms of coming out of these 2 meetings different from the way we came in. What are we going to pick up so that come Monday morning, we are able and we can then undertake to do something new, something different. Moderator, let me start, and I didn't ask how much time I have. I suppose it's unlimited.
Almost unlimited until I stop you, but 10 minutes.
Let me start by, I'll give 3 points related to also picking up on the keynote presentation, and very much in the context of lessons that we had in the last session. It's about what have we learned from the last 2 decades of CAADP, but even more beyond that, before that. And therefore, these lessons in the context of what should we be doing new, differently. And these are guiding principles, guiding lessons, issues that we have seen have actually made it happen or even hindered the happening. Then I'll conclude by sharing 2 points on action. What can we do to actually make a difference? So the first point in my submission is actually to recognize that, and as we always say, farmers are important. Farmers are important. Production is important. But we do know actually that before the farmers were farmers, they are consumers. So equally important is consumption. And sometimes in terms of situations, actually the aspect of consumption will be critical starting point. And I say this also in Africa, and looking at the last 2 decades, even you can go beyond from the 60s, 5-6 decades, our strategies have been about production. Strategies on agriculture, on food security, were all driven by efforts, by policies, by investments on the production side. And here I'm saying that we need to look at that again in terms of a strategy. And I'll speak more about how do we consider efforts that actually begin from the consumption angle in terms of determining what we do and how we do it. So this is about, in fact, when we talk about consumption, it's recognizing what we eat, how we eat. It's actually culture around food. It's the size, it's the form of all that. And that is equal to and relates to the markets. And I'll come back to the issue of the markets and market issues. But the whole issue is then that when you look at markets, which we talk about every day, this is not just the numbers, the billion people that are here, as we know from reality that actually other continents are probably benefiting more from Africa as a market than maybe ourselves. And that is the whole essence of the CFTA. And also recognizing that markets don't just happen. There is what is called market development. And what are we actually doing to develop the markets that are consistent with what we can produce, that are consistent with our feeding cultures, traditions, and consistent with what we can produce, what we can process, and actually consume. As many of you would know, there actually has been a study recently, actually more than once, but there's one recently about the production capability of the continent with regard to the ecosystem capabilities, with regard to which crop can grow where effectively, efficiently within the context of the environment, the rainfall and all that. Equally important would be a study to understand where are the markets from a consumption point of view, and superimposing that on production, I'm sure you can get somewhere than where we are at the moment. My second point is to say, when you look at all this scenario, there is actually the issue of food security, which we talk about all the time, and actually come to that as our rallying point. But we also know that there is implementation, and as we've heard even before, that a lot of the frustration is about results that are coming out of the actions, out of the implementation that we're doing. And what we're talking about today is how do we galvanize more capacity, more capability, more resources to actually make a difference at sustainable level, at transformative level, at a critical mass level in terms of everything we're doing. And I'm saying in this point that there has to be something that is cardinal to making it happen. And again, based on lessons from the field, there has to be incentives. There has to be disincentives to which catalyze action, and there has to be consequences in that equation. And this we know, actually, some people have spoken about the informal sector, and I'll come back to this point. But when you go in the grassroots, there are actually things happening, and there are lessons there. And that is how you can actually pick up on the issues of what is making it happen and what is driving it. And in that context, let me come to my third point on this front, is that making a difference, and I'm talking about, and I'm looking for something that is going to put fire on these chairs we are sitting on, so that we begin to feel uncomfortable. Because what we have to do as a continent is not going to come from us operating from our comfort zones. So when we change the narrative and begin to appreciate and look at what we're talking about, and I'm not giving it a name now, what we're talking about from a consumption point of view is actually going to be massively different. It's going to catalyze massively different way we approach the whole subject matter. In the first place, coming from consumption, you are going to realize that there is no way the Minister of Agriculture can take responsibility for food security, can take a monopoly on food security. You need more than production. That will be very, very obvious in terms of when you look at the issue is consumption. So you can't go and give that responsibility to Minister of Agriculture, or you can't go and give that responsibility to production alone. You also, in that sense, coming from a consumption point of view, you begin to see that a systems approach is actually not just the nice thing to do, but an imperative. And how we think in terms of how we leverage each other, how we relate to each other in the so-called coordination, collaboration, is going to differ. And in the way I actually engage the others is to appreciate that I have an objective, a goal around probably water security, but I know that until I work with a trade person, I may not achieve my own goal. So you begin also to see the greater good, something that has to come up, all of you acting together from different angles. at the same time achieving your own angles. So with that, you also begin to see, and we can see this in terms of the narrative, even that went into the CAADP Malabo goals. When you look at the 7 goals of CAADP Malabo, they already actually very clearly, strongly insinuated the issue of systems approach, that you have to go across sectors, across disciplines to make that happen. I'm actually also even contending that it's not, of the 7 commitments, I want to also emphasize, including the first and the number 7, because those look like more focusing on systems, and the systems, the mechanisms are just as important as the thematic issues. But I say that you can actually go for the 8th commitment, and the 8th commitment is that none of these 7 will succeed alone. You need to put them together if you need success, and sustainable success, systemic success. I'm going towards the end.
Okay, please conclude.
Yes. So in that case, now my last 2 points on action. Number 1 is that if you then need to do something different, and to look at it from a consumption point of view, you have to get to the front line. Some people call it to the last mile, because in that last mile, what they do has no sectors, has no disciplines, and they're on action in terms of implementation. And what is happening in that case is systemic, already, naturally, is integrated, is coordinated. And this is where you also see the whole aspect of leveraging each other across different sectors, different interests. And I say here, finally, that whether formal or informal, the intervention that comes from us when we are spoken here in the clouds to put our boots on the ground, one of the things we have to consider is actually policy that catalyze and supports the whole aspect of mitigating risks for business to grow, for access to happen, and incentives and policies that catalyze access to markets. And this is very critical in many of the instances. What we've heard in the first presentation there is what are we doing as governments, as private sector, to get actually the markets developed and access happening, access to technology, and also the whole element of competitiveness, which is actually a huge thing. I'm not going to develop it here, but what are the incentives? And when you talk about subsidies, these are things that should be on our mind than just the ordinary issues that we do when we mention subsidies. So let me end here, actually, and we can develop some of these things further in the context of the CFTA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. I think Martin makes a number of critical points there. Thank you very much for the round of applause. He deserves it. But one of the key points that Martin makes is that other continents are benefiting more from Africa as a market than ourselves. He makes so many points, but I think this point is just so telling that our market is here, we can see it, we are not benefiting, okay? Not much happening on intra-regional African trade. Thank you very much again, Martin. So let me move now to our next panelist, Dr. Hemon Sengamina, Secretary General from ASO, to also now give us his perspectives. You have 11 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. You have massacred my names very well. Hermogen Sengimana. Yeah. I thought you are a good listener when I said Sengimana.
Can you say that again?
Sengimana. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel, for the presentation. I think I would like to start on, if you look at what the panelist was talking about, Martins. you look at countries, let's start by an example. Countries which grow tea, coffee, cocoa, and I am part of those who come from the countries that grow coffee and tea. Only recently, it's when the farmer could taste the tea, could taste the coffee. Because before, like East Africa region, you grow tea, it's for export, you don't touch. Comes from Burundi, Rwanda, go to Kenya, labeled Kenyan, and goes. The same as coffee. They were even agronomists checking if you have touched the coffee, your own coffee that you are growing. But things are changing. You look at Ethiopia, 50% of coffee is locally consumed. The issue of consumers. Let's consume what we produce. That's where we can increase intra-Africa trade. But consuming what we produce, it doesn't mean that because we are brothers coming from all Africa, that's how we'll just accept your product. It's the issue that Daniel brought in. Is the food safe? Is it safe for me? On the government side, the government has a mandate to protect the consumers, making sure that the food on the market are safe. But as a consumer also myself, I don't want to just drink water when I don't know this water is safe. And when we talk about safety, we are talking about the NTBs that Daniel was presenting, non-tariff barriers. When you look at data, available data from UNCTAD, ITC, name it, 70% in agriculture area and food production, 70% of rejections of products are linked to TBT, technical barrier to trade, and sanitary and phytosanitary issues. But when you really analyze those rejections, are things that we can avoid ourselves, are due to storage, mainly when you are talking about aflatoxin, are due to how we grow our food. And that's where I want to bring in, moderator, the issue of standards, quality issue, the standards. This morning, one participant was talking about certification. The issue of standards, the standards, if we don't apply standards, implement standards from the beginning, we will have a problem. You know, probably some of you are saying, oh, we know it's increased the costs. But it increases the cost because we usually think about standards when we already have the product. And when you have that product, it's already contaminated, it will not be accepted on the market. The culture, quality culture, is needed from the beginning. If you are going to grow something, do you think about good agriculture practice from the beginning? You don't think about good agriculture practice when your cashew nuts are already there, ready for the market. You don't think about good manufacturing practice when you have already manufactured and you have used probably the materials that will contaminate your product. There are 3 C's, les trois C, 3 C's. 1 C, the standard will help you to compete. To compete, you can have That's good agricultural practice. It will save you to have the products that you want and in the size that you want. Productivity. Recent study looking at the role of standardization in the UK, not even in developing country, in the UK. It has shown that 28.7% of GDP growth was due to implementation of standard. 28.7% of GDP of UK. You can Google the GDP of UK, you see the amount of money. If you look at that percentage that is brought in by implementing standards, actually governments can do more on quality infrastructure, facilitating the farmers to comply with standards, because by implementing the standard, the government is also gaining the money. The GDP of a country is growing. Secondly, when you look at that compete, usually our Bureau of Standard, our regulators, they play a role of police. You see the Bureau of Standard, the inspectors, you run. It shouldn't be that way. The inspectors should be coming to help you. Yeah, you produce this water. We found there is these chemicals which are not good, but we can trace these chemicals from the origin and tell you, correct your manufacturing practice. The second C, the standard helps, they help you to conform to the market, because you are trading with Nigeria. Nigeria have the standards that will ask you to comply with. That's the role of the organization, African Organization for Standardization, an African Union organization. If you look at the AFCFTA TBT Annex 6, we are in charge of harmonizing those standards. Meaning we shouldn't actually be having a problem. We should be using one standard, the whole continent. Then when I produce according to that standard, I don't need to go through another testing in the importing country. What we call 1-1-1 principle. One standard, one test, one certificate accepted everywhere. And this conforming, it's what also moderator you talked about. Which market are you conforming to? Usually we have Europe, America that is coming to help our farmers. You produce for me. You are producing for me. You are not producing for the neighbor. Meaning they are investing into the farmers to produce for the external market. We should also do that. Let's help the farmers to produce for our market. And the standard, in a way, when we look at it like European standard or African standard, I have a recent example on cocoa industry. Actually, this morning, someone discussed about it. There is a standard on sustainability in cocoa. That standard in sustainability, it's a regulation from European Union. Then the standard was published, international standard, without taking into consideration our farmers' input. Then government of Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire requested African Organization for Standardization to develop, together with the farmers, cocoa boards in those different countries that are the first producers of cocoa. The standards that are also published is now the one used by Europe. We can also dictate market. That's the message I want to say. It's not just the importing country that can dictate the market in areas where we know Africa is leading. Finally, moderator, the last C is to connect to the market. Connecting to the market, that's where we go wrong. We forget our SMEs. Our SMEs, small and medium, we want on our continent to have a product that is platinum. We don't want to grow the farmers. We have a system at the continental level, what we call maturity model. Maturity model, you grow the farmer, you comply with standard. It's from the struggler, the beginner, comply to these critical areas of standardization because you are only trading on your local market. Imagine if you are selling meat and someone is telling you, you slaughter a goat, in 2 hours it's finished, and someone is telling you to have a big fridge, and that is for your local market, is for your neighbor. Yeah. It's something that we should look at, where is the market and how we connect to that market. I thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sengimana. You got the round of applause. I think very well deserved. Your presentation, inspirational, relevant, okay, to our situation in Africa today. So colleagues, our two presenters, the keynote speaker has given his speech. Our two panelists have put in their very, very, I think, relevant perspectives. I would like to give, I think we still have, about 5-6 minutes before we are thrown out of here. I would like to invite 1 or 2 interventions from the floor to interact with this very vibrant team here on these very important issues. I am seated here, but I am seeing, yes, I've seen hand number 1 there. Nice checked shirt, almost like mine. Next. Aha, another hand there, black jersey. Okay, and we have the 2 ones at the back, and that's it. Okay. So starting with the shirt like mine, let's have.
All right.
Your interaction.
Thank you very much. My name is Stwala Lipalil. I'm from ActionAid Zambia. From the first presentation, I do note what he presents and talks about the need to ramp up production in Africa if we're going to, attain or boost intra-African trade in agriculture, commodities and services. But also, as we talk about stimulating or increasing our production, I think the issues that he did raise as Africa that we are facing currently as a challenge are issues of climate change. The problem that we start with right now in terms of the agriculture sector also is that it is contributing negatively to the effects of climate change that we're facing, which also end up impacting the sector. When you look at a report that has been done by ActionAid International, the Fund Our Future report, campaign rather, there's a report which shows how financing is flowing and how it's affecting the climate crisis as we stand right now. Sadly, I didn't hear him really talk so much to issues of agroecology. I think we should be moving towards that direction of promoting agroecology on the African continent if we are to avert or, somehow mitigate or come out of this climate crisis, which is impacting our agricultural sector. If you look at the IPCC 60th assessment report, the special report on climate change, the Land and UN Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, they all speak to the need to move to agroecology. The issues of agricultural diversification cannot be overemphasized. But also, Mr. Waria did speak to the fact that there's a report which shows what crops you can grow in a certain region. I think as Africa, we should be moving at a pace of holding hands together. As an example, if you can't grow maize in Congo and Zambia can do it, why can't Zambia grow maize that can be exported to Congo, and why can't Congo grow a crop that is acceptable and is eatable in Zambia, but also ensuring that the standards are not compromised? And one of the standards that we're speaking about right now is good agricultural practices. Like the last presenter spoke to the doctor. I think our agricultural practices over time in agriculture have not been very sustainable, and they're not really good agricultural practices. Are we able to produce as a continent to a point where it is generally acceptable to say if this crop is produced in Zambia, it can sell in Nigeria, it can sell in Senegal, without talking about issues of standards, because then would have brought down the standards to come back to one level.
Thank you,
So
sir.
I think we should get to a point where we're able to produce for each other and trade crops in between each other, even if we don't need those crops as our staple foods. But I think we'll get to a point where we're able to become food secure as a continent. Thank you very
sir.
much.
Thank you, sir. We need to move on. The next question from the floor was coming from the other end, black jersey and glasses.
Good afternoon, moderator and the panelists. My name is Doreen Sakala Sianjani from the Ministry of Health, Zambia. I'm responsible for food safety as well as being Codex contact point. I think my intervention goes to Mr. Waria. I don't know if it's Mr. Waria or Dr. Waria. Issues related to food systems. We heard the presenter talk about the fact that if it is not safe, it is not food. And the last panelist also talked about the issue of standards. So how are we helping our producers? Because I think what we've noted as one of the regulators, especially being a regulator that looks at the product when it's placed on the market, you find that at the point that the product needs to be sold, it is not safe, it is not complying to food safety measures, maybe higher levels of aflatoxins, high levels of pesticide residues, because probably at the farm, there's not much monitoring that is taking place. Farmers, producers are applying these chemicals, especially pesticide residues, antimicrobial residues, without any monitoring. When it comes to issues of aflatoxins, we know that the commodity that is highly affected is peanuts. We can't really sell so much of our peanuts because most of the times when they're tested, they have higher levels of aflatoxins. So my question is, what measures are we putting in place to ensure that what we produce is tradable? Because I think it's not even an issue of not producing much, it's about how safe is what we are producing, because we can produce large metric tons of maize, of peanuts and other products, but as long as there's no conformity to stipulated standards, we can't sell it anywhere. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we're having. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irene. Very, very important question. How are we helping the farmers with those issues? Now, the last two questions at the back. Please go ahead, give us your name and ask your question. I thought, yeah, please go ahead. Introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hello, my name's Priscilla Fonduluka from academia, from the Levi Mwanawasa Medical University. First of all, thank you for your good presentation. My concern from your presentation is about protection for our farmers. In this regional trade, I was wondering as you were presenting, how much our farmers are locally protected. So from your presentation, I can actually pick one product, agricultural product, soybean. And here in Zambia, we have 3 regions that are leading in the production of soybeans. We have Northern, Central, and Eastern Province. If you pick Eastern Province, for example, you'll find that our farmers' soybean is being is crossing a lot, going into Malawi. And when it gets to Malawi, there it will be processed. and it comes back in many forms. And one of the sure forms is soya chunks, nyama soya pieces. And a lot of Zambian homes are actually consuming soya pieces, including the rural farmers. And for the farmers, they consume that without realizing that it's actually soya beans. So my point there is issues of import substitution. So you find the farmers are selling their soybean at a cheaper price, and then it comes back at an expensive rate when they come and consume it as soya pieces. So how do we protect farmers? We are talking about diverse diets, affordable diets, food security. They will lose their product like that. It doesn't bring them a lot of income, and then they're going to lose more money to purchase the same thing that they sold out in the form of raw materials. So in terms of import substitution, how much are you putting in to protect the local farmers in the wake of the regional trade? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Priscilla, the last question from the back. Okay. The one, okay, please go ahead. The lady, you are the right one. Please go ahead. Introduce yourself and ask your question.
It's not a question, it's just a contribution. I'm Tale Chambanenge, agricultural economist, and I'm a research assistant at InfoQuest Consult Limited. So I liked the first presentation where he put emphasis on trade. And I would also like to say that we can only achieve this if we identify the comparative advantage that each country has over the other in terms of commodities to be produced. By doing this, we'll not only maximize profit, but we'll also be able to produce a commodity at a very cheaper price, which will mean that there'll also be specialization, and which will then take us to the standards that the last speaker also mentioned. So for me, it's about a chain, which I wrote to say comparative advantage, leading to maximum profit, then specialization, giving us the standards that we need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that was Ntakisha for that contribution on comparative advantage. I think now we can hand it over to the panelists at this point. I think there will be opportunities. There's a very determined hand. Go ahead and ask your questions now, sir. Black jacket, white paper, go ahead very quickly. Your microphone.
Well, thank you very much. I'm called Bismarck Usunote, a farmer from Ghana, and also a member of the CADEP non-state actors. I want to seek some clarity from the two presenters and then share some other perspective, very short. The first point, the presentation from AGRA regarding the costs of agricultural infrastructure. I think it gleaned from a World Bank report that we needed $2 billion. In fact, Ghana alone, I think, needs more than $2 billion for agricultural infrastructure. So if that statistics is for the whole Africa, I think it has been understated. It needs to be looked at very well. Now, for the agricultural trade, I think that a lot of the focus has been on the commodities, but we have lost sight of the inputs that farmers use. Because I realized that, and in Ghana, it appears that a lot of the agricultural inputs, specifically feed and fertilizer, are imported from outside the continent. And I think it's an area that we seem to have lost focus on, and we are focusing much more on the crops. In our country, where we had a policy for agricultural subsidies, over 90% of that budget went into fertilizer and feeds, which were mostly imported. And once there was a disruption in the market due to COVID and Ukraine, we're all over the place. So I think that the emphasis should not only be on the products or the produce, but also on the inputs that we use for production. And my last question for the presenter who presented on the standards. I wanted, once he spoke about the fact there should be a one standard for the continent, which I agree, but I think we should also emphasize more on monitoring and the systems or the institutions that are supposed to do the regulatory work. Because how do you ensure that if you certify a company in country A, that you are qualified to produce for the whole continent? How do you ensure that person do not produce substandard in the next years, because there are not systems in place to ensure that? So those are the three issues that I want them to address for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, our colleague, non-state actor from Ghana. Okay, now, so back to our panelists. So we have those issues, perhaps too much emphasis on commodities. What about inputs in terms of trade? The issues of comparative advantage. How can we have protection for farmers? And the issues of food safety and the other issues raised by the colleague earlier. I think you got all of them. I think very helpful. I think input from the floor. So back to you now, the panelists. I think we're going to start with you, now that I know how to pronounce your name, Dr. Dr. Sengimana. I got it. Yeah, so Dr. Sengimana, then we go to Martin, and then we shall conclude with
Thank you, moderator.
Daniel. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Don't kill me, because if I use a little bit of time, I would like to say that trade is a war. It's not fair. It's not fair. We should, once you understand this, it's when Africa can trade. It's a war. I start with the input question. When the Ukraine-Russia war started, so many countries were getting fertilizers from Ukraine or Russia. Now they are more buying fertilizer from Morocco, our own country on the continent, which is one of the biggest producer of fertilizers. You know the reason? There was a standard that was adopted in many regional economical community that had levels of cadmium, those who know chemistry, levels of heavy metals that are not allowing Moroccan fertilizer to come to our own countries. But Morocco was also trading with Europe, was also trading with USA, but because, yeah, maybe there is trade agreement with other countries, we were not allowing Morocco. Then currently, as we have a standard at African level of fertilizer, currently countries have changed because of the war. They cannot get those fertilizers from Russia and Ukraine. They adopted African standard that is allowing Morocco fertilizer to be traded. And the countries have even signed an agreement with Morocco to have fertilizer industries within the countries. Then we say standards are based on science. Science is changed by a war. Yeah, we should understand. Trade, someone is there, is looking for a market, will put just one value that will change everything. That's where inputs, we cannot get inputs while Morocco is having the fertilizers. I will not talk about the seeds. There are also stories on seeds. The issue of certification, we have what we are pushing mutual recognition agreement. Mutual recognition agreement those are agreements between countries. When you use one standard, the same standard, you use tests within those standards, and the certificate can be accepted. But there is always market surveillance that is there, where you have inspectors. The issue is mainly on accreditation, the level of our quality infrastructure at the continent. If you look at the study we have done last year, only 6 countries can say 100%, I am good on verifying the technical barrier to trade. But there are other mechanisms that you use, what we call peer review mechanism. You can have experts going from country to a country to assess, meaning the systems are there. Europe use more mutual recognition agreement than Africa. And when you look at the WTO agreement, actually the mutual recognition agreements were put there to help developing countries. But we are the ones who are not using the mutual recognition agreement. The issue of agroecology, that's also something, before we conclude and say, let's all go agroecology, we should look into that. The main parties who you are trading with, we have a problem. Actually, it's also confusing. Somewhere we are saying we are not producing, and the other side we are saying have a loss, post-harvest loss, meaning there is something wrong. There is more production, yeah, we lose it because of the information flow and the infrastructure. One key issues on this agroecology that we need to understand, there is the regulation on ESG, environment, social, and governance, that was put there by European Union. I think we have an opportunity for this ESG actually to start trading to one another, because apart from the SPS issues that they were looking at, I am not ignoring that, that is very important, but we have issues of environment and social and governance. And as per now, by 2025, if you don't comply with the ESG, you will not be able to trade with the European Union. I think this is a debate that we should go into and start discussing, because it is there. See how we orient our market if possible. How we help farmers? For us, we have projects that are targeting more on women and youth. I am with my colleague here, Nadine, if you can stand up, if they are women and youth-led, they can get in touch with you and we can help you to comply with standard. Thank you.
You're right. As you can see, the organizers have been constantly coming here to say, we must close. So 1 point from you, Martin, and 1 point from you, Daniel. I'll also have 1 point, and we close. What's your big point, Martin?
Thank you, moderator. Yes, it's going to be 1 point, and I'll combine 2 issues. One is the element of food safety, and also the farmer protection. I think you covered a little bit on the farmer protection, but actually it's true, yes, to say if it's not safe, then it's not food. But as my colleague was saying, you don't start with that when the food is on the table. And it has, what I mean by that is that to deal with the food safety is actually beyond just production. It's beyond just agriculture. It's actually even well beyond just issues of standards. Standards is to enable you achieve what you want. But we have to talk about the policy that provides the incentives to put quality food on the table. We have to talk about infrastructure. We have to talk about capacity in terms of skills and other factors that actually, at the end of the day, we're able to pick up what is safe and come with it through the whole process of the food system, from production to consumption. And in just the element of protection, actually, for me, I would say farmers don't need protection. What farmers are looking for is a level ground to perform. And that is where, as governments, we need to go, is how do we provide a level ground for them to actually compete into the local, into the global market. And what you end up with, yes, it looks like protection, but the angle which you come in is going to determine to help you to have the right interventions that allows you not to keep farmers down there, but actually to enable them grow and be competitive in the global market whether it's the agro-food markets or otherwise.
Thank you, Martin. And there will be time to engage Dr. Martin Waria, after we are done here. Over to you now, Daniel.
Thanks a lot.
Keynote.
Chair, you give me one point, but I think majority of the questions were directed to me. I'll just
You have 3 minutes.
very quickly. Yeah. Let's start with an issue about agroecology. I think there's no debate about that. It's something that we should all be involved in. Agra itself has a fully fledged business line on sustainable farming, and agroecology is embedded in it. It's an important area, so I won't spend too much time there. A lady from Ministry of Health who are talking about at what point do we check food safety issues. Sometimes it's too late and what have you. I think that there's a number of ways, and I'll give you an example from the work that we do. Just by supporting farmers with two things. One, information as to what needs to be done to get to the market, what kinds of standards are required for the market. You will have solved the first problem. The second part is, for every product that you produce as a farmer, you need a market for it. And for that reason, all of us in here have the responsibility of helping create those linkages between farmers and the buyer, the processor or the trader. And usually when you create those relationships, there's information flow, from whoever is buying to say, this is what we need. And farmers get to learn and adapt, and change their behaviors in that way. But there has to be an incentive. If many a time you find that the price for graded maize is actually not too different from the price of graded maize. In that situation, there's no incentive for anyone to put in effort to change their behaviors. So as the market is continuously getting more and more structured, this information passes across. The less quality products do not get the best price, and farmers change behaviors. The issue that was raised around quickly on infrastructure. So that's a cost of adaptation, an adaptation cost, not building new infrastructure, but for whatever is already existing. The World Bank estimates are around 2.1 billion or 2.3 billion annually to just adapt some of that infrastructure to be more climate resilient. Maybe even introduce renewable energy or something like that. And I think that's where the math is coming from. There's also a report from the bank that you can obviously look at. The comment from, I think, academia on protecting farmers, I don't want to spend much time. I think colleagues have dealt with it very well. But the issue of inputs trade, and we cannot divorce inputs trade from produce or output trade, because at the end of the day, it's the same economics of how much profit am I able to make if I produce soybeans, and you find that those that have a better profit margin are able to invest even in improving the kinds of inputs that they get. But at the end of the day, we are, as Agra, for example, we're looking at investing in building more and more companies in R&D. We noted the issues to do with low investment in R&D. Companies that are producing new cultivars, new varieties, and also scaling, seed multiplication to reach more farmers. I think that's a big area. The other issue is what my colleague mentioned, which is harmonization of standards. Just to move inputs from one country to another has been a hurdle for many years, but we are seeing, regional economic communities working to harmonize, input trade regulations to allow the smooth flow of some of these inputs so that, they reach the other country with less encumbrances.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Daniel, for the very important infrastructure issues you emphasize. Thank you very much, Martin, for the key point that you underlined, that the market is here within the African continent. Let us get it. Thank you very much, Dr. Sengimana, for the point you emphasize, that trade is a war. Trade is not a brother issue or a sister to sister issue. We need to know the standards in order to trade. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for these panelists. Thank you very much. We are done.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Monyada and your panelists. Thank you. And well done, everyone. We have only one more session. So let's stand and stretch. Let's all stand. Please stand. Stretch. Okay. I want us to do an exercise. Don't sit just yet. Have an option of an exercise. Either stand on one foot, on one leg for a while, but I'm going to ask you to do something else. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Please close your eyes. Don't sleep. I said, when you're standing, just close your eyes. And if you can point to what you believe is the true north. Closing your eyes, please close your eyes. Turn if you need to turn and point to where you believe the true north is, or just the north. There's true north, there is magnetic north. Just say your north. Where do you think the north is? Okay. So open your eyes, still pointing to your north, and let's see whether looks as if north is anywhere and everywhere. Thank you. Thank you. You may be seated. Thank you. Okay. Before we go to our last session, just an announcement that some of you have hard copy programs. These were produced way before a number of adjustments were made. So this is not very accurate. We apologize for not letting you know that. So if you want the most updated program, you need to access it from the website that you used to register for this event. So later, if you can go back to the website, you'll find the latest program in case you're wondering why some sessions are different from what you have on the hard copy. Thank you. I think we are ready for our next session. In this last session, Dr. Monyanda was helping us to look at the fifth CADIP commitment on boosting trade. Our last panel discussion is on commitment number 3, and that is ending hunger and having poverty by 2025. And to help us to lead this conversation, I want to invite Professor Francis Zotto from Ghana. Professor Zotto, if we could appreciate him as he comes to the front. And Professor Francis will introduce first of all the keynote presenter and then your panelists, sir. Thank you.
Hello all. There is something better I want us to do. Shall we rise up, please? I know you pointed to the north, but I want us to be children again. I want us to be children again. Let's have some bit of fun. And I learned this from my French colleagues. You know, I come from West Africa, and we are surrounded by French-speaking countries. Please, don't be angry with me. Let's be children again. There's a song I'm going to teach you, and I know you've had lunch, and so some of you are feeling very sleepy. And don't sleep on my sessions. There's a song, Booma ma ye 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 oh, Booma ma ye ye ye. Simple, okay? So, Booma ma ye 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 oh, Booma ma ye ye ye. Let's be children again. Can you follow me? Booma ma ye 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 oh, Booma ma ye ye ye.
Is it simple enough? So as we sing it, we increase the tempo, and you'll be surprised the energy you would have for the rest of the next session. Okay, let's go. Mama, yeah, yeah, yeah. Mama, yeah, yeah. You're not singing. Let's go. Mama, yeah, yeah, yeah. Mama, yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's go faster. Mama, yeah, yeah, yeah. Be stepping on. Mama, yeah, yeah, yeah. Can we do it faster? Mama, yeah, yeah, yeah. Mama, yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you are not ready today. I'll take you on the third day. Please sit down. It's a privilege, it's an honor to be here. Now, this session should have been moderated by my very good friend, Bibi Giyosi, but she's been caught up elsewhere. And so I've had to step in for her because I made that promise that whenever Bibi is not in, they can call on me. That was an expensive promise I made. And so I would have to live up to it. And for the next session, looking at the biennial review commitment of ending hunger and halving poverty by 2025, I stand before you humbled, and my name is Professor Francis Zoto, a professor of public health nutrition at the University of Health and Allied Sciences. Now, I flew all the way from Ghana, but I also wear 3 hats. I'm the vice president for the International Union of Nutritional Sciences, which oversees the direct nutrition at a global level. I am also a director and a trustee for Africa Catalyzing Nutrition Actions in Africa. And the things that we are talking about is what African is very passionate about. How can we as Africans begin to rise and change the landscape? It is not for our leaders alone, it's for each and every one of us gathered here. And I'm hoping that in your intervention, you'll not be asking the panelists questions, but I want you to speak your heart out. How Africa can change the landscape and end hunger and poverty so that we can reduce poverty by 2025. I believe we can, collectively. And with me to help us out, we also have a keynote, and the keynote will be presented by none other than my very good friend, Muzi. Is Muzi here? Muzi Sukati. I need you here very much. Whenever Muzi is here, I'm very comfortable because I know that he brings the issues. Muzi works with the FAO. I also want to invite, and Muzi, you sit by me. There are quite a number of people I'm going to invite. My brother Sunday Uheni, I need you here. He's a former cadet and an independent consultant. Sunday was sitting by me, and he didn't know that I was going to moderate the session. We're going to ask him, put him on the spot, and he's going to give us his passion about ending hunger in Africa and having poverty. We also have Mr. Matthews Uhuru from the Zambia Food and Nutrition Security Commission. Are you here, Mr. Matthews Uhuru? Fortunately, I've got a big house here, so nobody has been locked anywhere. I also have Dr. Rhoda Mofa. Is she here? Coordinator of Nutrition and Food Security. Wonderful. I need you here. Then we have Dr. Chris Toh, Senior Advisor of WFP. Are you here? These are key issues we are talking about. And so I need a full house. Then we have Professor Liz Costin from the University of Pretoria. Where are you? Don't worry, if we finish, you can take my seat. I'll stand. I'm good at standing. I'm a teacher. Then we have Laila Omaga from UNICEF, representative in Liberia. Are you here? The good thing is that we'll talk until we get tired. There's going to be an evening tea, but as moderator, I may skip it because I see a cocktail networking event. So don't worry about the time. You should be passionate about the issues that we're going to be talking about. Is there any other person who should be invited? Is that all? Okay. So without wasting much time, I'm going to give the opportunity to Mr. Muzi Sukati to come and give his keynote. So Muzi, over to you. As they say in Ghana, Jolati.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, colleagues. I know it's the last presentation, but I hope we will try to garner the last energy, because I think this topic that we are going to talk about, it's not probably the most important, but it's very important like all the others, because at the end of the day, whatever we do with our food systems, they will show with the levels of hunger and malnutrition in our continent. So I will try to move the slides. I'm not sure how to do it. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay, so the objective of this presentation is like we know like ending hunger is a commitment. Is commitment number 3 of the biennial review of the CADA process. In fact, it's the commitment whereby a lot of the indicators of the biennial review process are found. So it forms a very big chunk of whatever we discussed when we, whatever we see in the dashboard of the outcome of the biennial review. So as we all know, it is very crucial for sustainable development. Whatever we do, at the end of the day, we have the commitment in the continent to end hunger and all forms of malnutrition, and to ensure that we use agriculture and food systems to transform our food systems. Oh, I don't know what happened. Okay, I'm struggling with this. Okay, so what is the background quickly? Because I will try to be quick. I know we are all tired. We want to hear from you and the colleagues. I'll just give the technical background, the truth as it is, and then I'll leave the discussions to you. So we all know that this is a commitment that was renewed in 2014, 2015 with targets to 2025. So the indicators that are found in this sub-theme are geared towards agricultural inputs and technology, increasing production and productivity. So you can look at the malnutrition issues, but it underlines the whole value chain issues of things, you know, the production productivity. It also touches on issues of post-harvest loss, issues of improving food safety, which we know very well has got serious trade implications. And we have been working with experts across the continent to suggest new indicators, including new indicators of tracking inputs in improved seeds of livestock and crops. We have new indicators on tracking biofortification. We know the importance of biofortification on nutrition, the cost of healthy diets, because it has been observed that a lot of households cannot afford healthy diets. In fact, up to 1 billion, more than 1 billion in Africa estimate. And of course, tracking the development of adult obesity. We know that it is becoming a problem. In the 4th BL cycle, which we don't want to talk about it now, I think the director in AUC said the report is still being cooked. It will not come out until it is sanctioned by the ministers. It is tracked, the ending hunger indicators has got a maximum score of 9.08, whereby if a country hits that score, it means it has done perfectly well in all the indicators. Okay, I think we've seen this picture in the morning. During the 3rd BR cycle, the overall Kenya was the only country that was on track. I think we had this in the morning. And it is important, if you are interested in this report, you can go to that link there, that website. It just gives the whole story of what happened in the 3rd BR process. So the global picture, we've heard about this. Africa is off track in meeting our hunger commitments. You know, we are hit by a lot of shocks, even shocks that are outside the continent. The Ukraine war, for example, has been
has been the center stage now outside, following the COVID-19 pandemic. So like people are still hungry. I think we know the statistics. For example, the prevalence of undernourishment in Africa rose by close to 20% in 2021, and it's rising up also in 2022, affecting a lot of people, and numbers are increasing. 11 million people facing hunger, and more than 57 million people since the outbreak. So shocks after shocks that are building on each other. So what are the indicators that are here? I just want to highlight the indicators that are here because this forms the chunk of the indicators. We have the indicator on access to agricultural inputs and technology. I really like the inputs of the colleague who was put emphasis on agriculture is not just what you eat, the inputs and the whole value chain aspect of it is extremely important. So the fertilizer consumption is one of the indicators that we track under this commitment. It follows the Abuja Declaration of 2006, whereby the target is at least Africa should be seen to be applying 50 kilograms of fertilizer per hectare. It has a lot of issues, you know. As who are working in this thing, we fight all the time. I think the experts who are in the house know, because it brings out the issues of inorganic fertilizers. If we are promoting, if you are promoting the inorganic fertilizers, it has the harm to the environment. Why are we promoting these things? What about organic fertilizers? So I'm just wanting to highlight that we fight a lot when we are producing the PL report. It's not easy. So that is the indicator there. Other indicator, growth rate of the size of irrigated areas versus the 2015 benchmark. How does the continent perform in promoting in the irrigation? For other indicator on growth rate of the ratio of supplied quality inputs to the national input requirements. So like what are the growth rate of quality inputs that go into agricultural production? Proportion of farmers having advisory services is also one of the indicator here. It's frozen again. Okay, so another indicator on the total spending in agricultural research. We know that Africa is spending very little on agricultural research. Probably that is why the continent is lagging behind. So we want to track how are we performing in improving agricultural research? Commitments to funding agricultural research. Okay, indicator of farmers having land rights is extremely important. We cannot do farming without land. Livestock seed, this is one of the indicators that has been added as new to promoting the livestock sector, because I think it was realized that we are focusing a lot on the crop aspects, when we know very well the importance of animal protein. I think if during our lunch we didn't have meat, I don't think a lot of us would be happy. So there are also productivity indicators, you know, like productivity, how well the agricultural sector is performing. We are looking at growth rate of agricultural value added in constant US dollar per agricultural worker. How much productive are the agricultural workers? There is also the growth rate of the productivity of the land now per worker, the productivity of the land as well. The value add, how much the land is adding value to the agricultural activities. Agricultural contribution to the GDP. So this is a straightforward indicator on yields, you know. So countries are free to choose up to 5 key commodities that they want to select. So the yield of those commodities that they choose, we know that the yield in the continent is very low, you know, even less than 2 tons per hectare or something, like for many cereals. So this indicator I really like, you know, because we struggle a lot with data in this indicator on post-harvest loss, because the commitment was from 2015 to 2025, we need to reduce post-harvest loss by half. So it's an indicator that is giving us a lot of headache in terms of data quality from the country and tracking progress. It's not only for the African continent. Tracking post-harvest loss is not even easy, even for the for the global developed countries. Social protection is also one of the indicators found here. How much of the budget line is going into social protection? As you can see, this indicator can be volatile. In 1 year, it could be up, in another year, it could be down, depending on what is happening in the country. For example, with the COVID outbreak, we were expecting that probably countries would increase funding for social protection because of the impact of the disease on household income. Okay, so then we go to probably the indicators that a lot of colleagues working in hunger and malnutrition were waiting for. So the prevalence of stunting is also there. The target is to reduce it to 10% or less. The prevalence of underweight reduces by 5% or less per country. Prevalence of wasting as well, and the prevalence of undernourishment. I think these are the critical. If you are a nutrition person, you will see that. Probably will think that, oh no, these were the indicators that should have been in these thematic areas. But like we saw, it's bigger than that. And then the proportion of increasing proportion of women of reproductive age, 15 to 49 years, our mothers, our sisters that attain minimum dietary diversity score. So a lot of these indicators are extremely technical, and we are happy that a lot of developmental partners are working in this space, including UN agencies, UNICEF, WHO, FAO itself, WFP, etc., to help generate these statistics. And then proportion of children who also meet the minimum acceptable diet is also here. So you will expect that we get these statistics from organizations like UNICEF. Okay, so the prevalence of adult individuals that are experiencing modern and severe food insecurity in the population. This is an SDG indicator, which is a custodian which FAO is supporting countries to track. It also it's a very useful indicator, because if you include it in the household survey, it's a questionnaire based. It then ranks the scores and scores the countries. So a lot of these indicators are very, very technical and really need statisticians and people who work on these sectors. And it brings in then now the question of, do the countries have capacity to generate these statistics, and the importance of developmental partners. Indicator, we're working with ACRA on this one to help us to track the cost of healthy diets in household expenditure, and then the new indicator as well of tracking adult obesity. These are very new, and we've been struggling to get data. All these indicators come up with teething problems. Where is it? Okay. So this is another indicator that I really like. I will thank the SPS teams. You know, I think they know themselves, like the African Union wing that is responsible for this. They come up with a SPS indicator. It's very much linked to trade, and it has those targets there: SPS systems, health indicator, and trade indicator. So it's a comprehensive indicator that needs technical expertise. I know I've seen some of the expertise here. They will also be helping us in answering probably some of the questions. Biofortification is a new indicator. Scaling up biofortification, it follows an AU declaration. So African Union and partners decided probably we need an indicator to track this. So in short, the PR process itself, it's a trend indicator. So what I can say straightforward is that we are struggling with the quality of the data we are getting from countries. We are wasting a lot of resources trying to make sense of the data that comes from countries, and it's no longer easy for some of us who are leading some of these thematic indicators. We will just go to a session for 1 week, trashing the issues, and it's really not nice. But when you look at the trends, some of the trends are looking sensible. Like if you see the prevalence of undernourishment from it makes sense, you know. So these are some of the indicators that are good. If you look at the agricultural land, the L3 is how much land is classified as agricultural land. It's a sensible data. Botswana is a smaller country. A lot of it is probably dry. You look at Benin, it's smaller than Angola. So a lot of the statistics are making sense. So what this is to say that there is hope. If we look at the positives, there is hope. So in the last BR process, we had 21 indicators under the ending hunger thematic areas like I've presented. So you will expect that all the countries there, they will hit that 21 there. So just look at what is happening. Some countries are not reporting. A lot of countries are hitting 20. We are struggling. And then if you are going to score a country that is just not reported, how are you going to do it? So it's nice to see the document when it's done, but the work that is going behind is really vigorous. I'll take an example of the fertilizer consumption kilogram per hectare. These are the trends we saw in the last BR. Some countries hitting the maximum, including countries like Tunisia. This is what the countries reported. Like some countries like Egypt, they are really doing very well. So this is what the countries reported. So a lot of countries are still lagging behind. So what are some of the challenges that we see as we support countries and the PR process? Many countries are failing to report on all the indicators. I've just seen these, some of the indicators, especially on post-harvest loss, agricultural inputs, they seem to be complicated. They get really complicated even to us, the technical people and all the statisticians we work with. We really fight on making sense of it. How much more in the countries. Many indicators are silent. By saying silent indicators, when we look at the indicators, a lot of the countries have not reported on it. It's clear that they don't understand it. We just shut it down. We don't use it as a score. So if we are getting many of these silent indicators, it's not good because it means countries are not coping. They don't report on it. There is evidence of poor understanding of the indicators as we see from the countries. And some countries, honestly, they report very, very ridiculous results. So you can see that maybe they don't understand the units or what. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done at country level. Some of the data that is reported is not uniform, meaning that countries do not have the same understanding. They are very good countries. I think some countries really need awards. I don't want to mention any single country here. I'll just keep it like that. And then some countries do not report on time. So it affects the process because this is it's time bound. I think the African Union know how much stress they work under because they have to submit the report to the meeting of ministers, and it must be done on time. We cannot report it, delay that. And then some indicators could be made gender sensitive, to even probably youth sensitive. Okay, solution to improve the data. Partners should come together and support the countries. The African Union is extremely important, building the technical capacity at country level. And there is a consideration of demystifying some of the indicators and probably adding some straightforward indicators, because the thing is, a lot of the indicators, they are correlated, I can say. So if we are saying that a country is increasing the use of fertilizer and then we are seeing a reduction in the prevalence of undernourishment, there should be a positive correlation, straightforward. Like if you are seeing the productivity of a country, it should correlate with increase in fertilizer use. So I think there are these big indicators. Probably we could focus on less bigger high impact indicators that we can use. And then also the Malabo indicators and aligning them to the SDGs is still a very, very critical area of work. And we are hoping with the discussions of the post-Malabo commitments, we are going to work around that. Thank you. I'm sorry if I took too long. This was my last.
So much, Muzi, and sorry I stood, and I didn't want it to go beyond 18 minutes. There's so much to talk about, and I'm really glad I have a full panelist here who are going to talk about the real issue. When all has been said and done, let's go into plain English. How do we end hunger and halve poverty in 2 years' time? A lot of grammar was said that by the year 2021, we'll silence the guns. Have we silenced the guns? I don't know. I don't think so. Agenda 2063 tells us that. Now, this is one commitment I am determined to find out from the great panelists, how we can end hunger and halve poverty in 2 years' time or 1.5 years' time. I want to start this by going to Matthew's Uhuru. And our speaker had made mention a lot of things, and he talked about ending hunger is both a moral and economic imperative. The question I ask is, how do we keep the momentum and redouble our current efforts to reduce hunger? Matthew, help us and start the ball rolling by that. And maybe add your thoughts to it. I've given you only 5 minutes because I realize that we have a lot to go through. So 5 minutes, I want to share your thoughts with us.
Okay, thank you very much. So probably as I start, just to share my reflections, especially on the presentation that was just given and the question that has come through on how we keep the momentum and just redouble efforts for us to end hunger. I wanted to start by just unpacking the same term, hunger. So by hunger, I think most of us that might have worked in the nutrition space know that we're not only talking about, filling our bellies with food, but we are looking at, also satisfying our bodies with the micronutrients that are required. So looking at diets and food that we consume, we have to eat, the food that meets our dietary needs. So I wanted to start from there and probably just share my perspectives from the nutrition lens. I also have, probably before we talk about, keeping the momentum and also just us having to redouble our efforts. The question is, why are we also making slow progress? Reflections from my country, Zambia. I know that one of the reasons why Zambia would probably be reducing certain nutrition indicators like stunting by maybe close to 1% on an annual basis is the issue of coverage. How much are we doing? Are we reaching everybody who needs the interventions that are required? So we are not really, getting the coverage right to, address all forms of malnutrition with the right interventions. Interventions are known by most of the experts because these are evidence-based interventions. But when it comes to coverage, we are not really covering the country, to the, extent that we need to. Secondly, I think it's a known fact to everybody whose ear is on the ground that if you look at nutrition financing, I think we are also losing grip. A number of countries, for my country, Zambia, I know that a number of, we've gotten a lot of support from cooperating partners and the like, but a number of the programs that we have, which are, life-saving interventions, are coming to an end. And some of us that are working in the space know that it's a little bit unclear on the sustenance of some of these programs. So we've not had full coverage, with the interventions that we need. And of course, there's the threat of, just sustainability of some of these interventions. So we get to worry on how we are going to end hunger and just ensure that all forms of malnutrition are addressed in our country. So all of those are not giving us, peace. So as we put together, ideas on how we keep the momentum, I feel there is need for recommitment, from just the scratch. Because if you look at a country like Zambia, you realize that issues of coordination, we've, one of the best structures in terms of nutrition coordination. Earlier on, I think there was mention in the panels that might have spoken earlier that, our coordination structures would start, from the vice president's office going all the way to community level. But now the question is, how do we also ensure that the coordination that we have can really give us the results that we need? So the more we look at that, the more we discuss how effective, some of these systems are, and also just looking at, how we get the financing right, I feel that is the only way that will make more meaningful progress, as well as also just addressing the issues that we are reducing at a very, very slow rate. So I guess also the other aspect of learning from other regions that have done well would benefit us all as Africa, because I know that we might not meet our targets, even just the Agenda 2030 when it comes to SDG 2, because earlier presentations indicated that we just have about, I think, 4 countries that are on track. So we really need to get to rethink what has made us make slow progress first before we even think of getting or just keeping the momentum and just increasing or just getting to redouble our current interventions. So I guess those are some of the questions that we really need to have answers to, and the more we are honest about this, I think the better, and the more we are likely to make progress and just keep the momentum going. For now, I end here, sir.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Now I want to go to, and thank you very much, a good applause. I want to go to my very good friend, Sunday. Now, you've heard the keynote, but the question I want you to also address, that he said, ending hunger is both a moral and an economic imperative. Do you agree? How can we use those two keywords, about morality and an economic imperative, to address the perennial problem we have in our continent? Sunday.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I want to say quickly that I acknowledge those who have built my capacity. I'm seeing Dr. Estherine Futterberg here. Her signature was on every letter that supported my capacity building. So I appreciate you. I appreciate Martin Waria because he was sending experts to support me when I was focal point person in my country. Even to sub-national levels, he sent experts to observe, and we were working harmoniously. And the last person is Kefiwe Maolosi. Each time she comes to my country, she calls me that she's in town. Please come and help to moderate or support, whichever way. So thank you very much. I appreciate you. Now, if I make statements that are not in the books, please forgive me. Because as you can see, I'm ancient and modern. I'm an old man. So I knew the British so well, and I knew what they did in Nigeria. They supported production. They provided bicycles and motorcycles for extension agents. They provided Land Rovers. They paid bills for all those who supported production. They paid the producers to bring their produce. In my place, it was more palm kernel. That was the cash crop that they were loading. And why I came very close is because one of the British men married a woman from my place, and she gave birth to a child. It was secret, but the child looked like him. As old as he was, the child was a replica of him. And this child grew up with us. So we were friends, but he cannot leave the child. The man worked for United African Company, which was moving crop out of Nigeria to Liverpool to other places. So we knew everything they did. They did business of moving produce into Europe for their own industries. So I know that I can do better than them because I can produce and process and ensure that only final products will go to Europe. So I proved the point that I know what the British did. Then on CADEB, my president led African Union as chairman of African Union to the Millennium Summit in 2000. And when he came back, the process of NEPAD and CADEB started. And that was how CADEP was launched, along with school feeding program in 2003. I'm giving you this background for those who don't know, to know that certain things may not be so obvious. So my president, I was among those who were briefing him and reminding him about NEPAD and CADEP, his responsibility for that. So immediately he came from the Millennium Summit in 2000. In 2001, NEPAD was launched. And when NEPAD was launched, he came back home. What rang the bell in his head? He told us that God told him to feed the children, and they have adopted school feeding program. That was one thing that he legislated. He prepared a bill and sent to the parliament. And in 2004, a bill came out that a free lunch for every child in public school in Nigeria must be free. And every child was entitled to the free lunch to the extent that any child that didn't have free lunch can take the government to court and win the case and claim damages. So that was one thing that he did at the time. So now that CADEP and school feeding were launched at the same time, I'm so happy that CADEP and Adfns is coming back 20 years later together. I don't know the circumstances that led to it, but I wish they were together all these years, from 2003 to 2022. But now, after 20 years, these have come together. That means while we think of the process of strategy, plan, implementation, monitoring, we have evidence in how many children are coming out of malnutrition, how many children are coming out of stunting, how many children are enrolling in schools, how many children are capable of educating their own families about food and nutrition. So now, I want to say that if you want to build a house, the architect can design the house. But when you want to build, where do you build from? Do you build from the roof or you build from the foundation? You must build from the foundation. So while we design the process of CADEP, strategy, plans, implementation, monitoring and evaluation, implementation must essentially be bottom up. The design can be top bottom, quite fine, but implementation must be bottom up. Now, if implementation must be bottom up, where do we start from the bottom? Where is the foundation? And this is where my love for the school feeding program is, because the school feeding program is supposed to be homegrown and community driven. And as an expert, I saw that the farmers in the community, the processors in the community, and the school, which is the market for the segment of those items of commodity produced in the community, is there. So there's a value chain in the community. The food grown, all the ingredients grown in the community are processed. So and then
to wrap up.
Yes, I'll wrap up. Now, if we have to implement ending hunger, the first thing we do is a baseline study, especially because of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. Have we done a baseline study of which trade is going on now? And if there's a trade going on now, how do we expand the trade, or how do we support that trade? How do we maintain standards and quality? Then secondly, how do we support this value chain in the communities? How do we support the small-scale farmers that are producing the food items that are being consumed in the communities and that is supporting the school feeding program in the schools? How do we support that value chain in the first place so that they will produce enough food and process enough and maintain standards and be sure that their surplus is properly preserved in good storage warehouses? And then if we are thinking of exports, it starts in the community because it is the surplus that is produced by the farmers. And that's what the Asians are doing. I heard that in Malaysia, the government actually supervised the farmers to produce rice and make sure that the farmers have minimum of 30% profit in selling their own products. But we are importing from them. So the price they give us is based on the farmers' profit and then the benefit to the country. So how do we support that value chain at the community level? Because building a house must be from the grassroots. We have 2 years to get to 2025. Does it take us 2 years to build a house? How many communities can we focus on now so that we can start seeing the numbers of the farmers supported, the processors supported, so they can be like their counterparts in other continents? What is wrong with our own farmers? Are they so blocked in the brain that they cannot behave like their counterparts elsewhere? I don't think they are so bad.
Yeah. Okay.
So, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot to say, but I think we can do better if we focus on the foundation and build from the foundation while we implement. We cannot implement from the roof. We must implement and then start seeing the numbers. How many communities have we been able to educate on balanced diets based on what is available now? How many communities have we been able to support to expand their production so that they can sell surpluses and earn more money so they can come out of poverty? I was in Brasilia.
Yes,
right. And I saw what happened. Their ministry of fight against hunger. That was the way they called the ministry at the federal level. But at the counties, they had the mayors in the counties and their wives were serving food to the children in schools. And they had a program that the parents of the children had conditional cash transfer, and they were able to monitor their progress until they exit poverty. And they were keeping data on how many people entered the program of conditional cash transfer and came out of it. So they were able to see how many people are coming out of poverty continuously. We can do more than that.
Yes, we can do more.
Thank you very much.
So, thank you very much. Please, a hand of applause to him. If you leave my brother Sunday, you will give a whole lecture for 2 hours. But talking about a very important point. Now, I want us to go to Liz, Dr. Costin. Now, the speaker, the keynote speaker, talked about social protection. Now, he mentioned the fact that by the year 2030, there'll be 600 million that will be chronically malnourished. I know a great number is coming from Africa. As my Nigerian brother would say, Tafiakwa. We must do something, we'll do everything to try and then arrest that problem. How does social protection, in addition to your intervention, things that the keynote has said, I'm quite interested in your perspective on social protection. Thank you.
Okay. I think, well, I'm not an expert in social protection, but I think it's a critical intervention that that is required for us to really halve hunger. And if you think of social protection and you think of hunger, and we said that hunger is a moral issue, and so is social protection. And to me, it goes beyond a moral issue. It's also about dignity and pride, and that's a very key element in the food security discussions globally. And it's also about the right to food, the right to water and safe potable water, the right to access not only to food, but safe, nutritious food. And to me, social protection is to me part and parcel of this discussion around our responsibility. And when do we as a community step in? When do we as a society or a government or the people of the world, humanity? If I think of hunger, I think of famine, I think of starvation. And one of the realities we face is that with climate change, we may have to deal with it within the next 2 years, never mind cut hunger. and poverty in the continent. So to me, we need to step up and protect the most vulnerable, the people who do not have the means to help themselves or even to help their communities. And a very important lesson for us was COVID. You know, we could pull it together during COVID. We could stand up and help each other, and we could reach out to communities. I knew many farmers who started harvesting the food in the field, and they moved it to the nearby communities. And humanity, to me, was the winner in this very expensive lesson. And I think we have many more examples. The school feeding program was mentioned. It's a very important part of it. And we can unpack these issues one by one. But let me first hand over to the other panelists.
Thank you. But before I come to Rhoda, who will be the last presenter, I want to go to my brother, Dr. Christo. And there is something that our keynote talked about, and that is something that I want you to address in addition to what you heard. Now, the multifacetedness, how multifaceted our whole system must come in to address the hunger and poverty issue. It has to be coordinated, that has to be integrated, and also we need an aligned approach. If we really want to reduce hunger, if we want to reduce poverty in our continent, need a holistic approach. What are your thoughts? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Let me start off with just one or two observations. The first is that ending hunger or reducing poverty is not only a moral and economic imperative. I think they are also, for Africa, a global obligation, in the sense that we bear the heaviest burden when it comes to food insecurity. More of our people, 1 in 5, are food insecure. We also have more poor people in Africa as a whole than in most other places. So we have an obligation. If we do not achieve these commitments or make significant progress towards ending hunger and reducing extreme poverty, then the world is not going to be able to achieve that. We will not achieve the SDGs. Surely 1 and 2 will not be achieved. So achieving these Malabo commitments is also going to help the world to achieve the SDGs, especially 1 and 2. That's the first point. The second point then will be, what do we need to do that is multifaceted in such a way that we can get this done? I always said, and I served as Minister of Agriculture of Liberia for almost 4 years. And whether it was with the Minister of Finance or the Minister of Public Works, who was in charge of infrastructure, I always told them that developing agriculture, especially the smallholder sector, is everybody's business. Because in agriculture, in most of our countries, that is where you have the most people. And if you want the president that you serve to be able to get re-elected, then of course, who do you want to make sure you address? That is the rural sector. So it is very important that we view the work we do here from a multifaceted perspective. So what are some of the things that we need to do? First of all, you said something about silencing the guns. You cannot reduce poverty You cannot reduce hunger when the guns are blazing. Right now in Africa, we got close to 35 armed conflicts. We've got to reduce them. I'm only afraid that one of my colleagues, the panelists before us, indicated that as we try to increase intra-regional trade, there's going to be more wars. Trade wars, he called them. That trading is war. So I really hope that we do not increase the number of conflicts that we already have on this continent. We need to actually reduce the number of conflicts. The second thing is the issue of the sort of growth and development policies that we put into place. In most of our countries, especially in the last 20 or more years, most of that growth has come from investment in extractive industries. These industries usually are not pro-poor. They do not help the poor people. So we need to reorient those policies. We need to invest more in agriculture and other rural development sectors. So that is very important. Another thing we need to do, and this may be the elephant in the room, is that we've got to find a way to address what I will call our demographic transformation. Yes, mortality rates are falling, but of course, Africa experiences very high fertility rates. We've got to deal with this. When per capita income growth, even over the next 2, 3, 4 years, is expected to be lower than population growth, then you got a problem. We've got to find a way of reversing that. And then to address the question you posed very quickly is we need that help. And there are opportunities here. I think because of Africa's assertiveness, especially in the last 10 or 15 years, Africa now has a seat on the G20. Africa now has an additional seat on the IMF board of directors. So we need to form alliances, not only alliances at the national level, where we work with the private sector, we work with communities, we work with other people, government agencies and others, but also at the international level, where we partner with UN agencies, with foundations and others to be able to address the issues that we face. So we have an opportunity to form alliances. So I think there are many ways we can go at this, but addressing some of these things, including inequality, for example, this will help us to actually not only end hunger, but start to make a dent in terms of widespread poverty. Thank you.
And our panelists have all done very well. But last but not the least, Rhoda, I am informed that nutrition is at the heart of the presidency. How has that helped in transforming Zambia's national priority agenda on food production? Looking at this, can you tell a story that Zambia is indeed on the road to ending hunger and having poverty from your country's perspective? Thank you. You okay with that?
Yes. All right. Thank you very much, moderator. Being the last speaker, it's so tempting to just say as above. Yeah. So malnutrition in Zambia, as one of the previous ministers used to put it, was a symptom of poverty. And I like echoing that. I know it usually doesn't sit very well with the nutritionists because they want to look at it from the double-bedded, the overweight side as well, which is not usually a symptom of poverty. But if we are talking about hunger, we are talking about stunting, we are talking about wasting. Muzi highlighted the four indicators of hunger, which is the prevalence of undernourishment. And if I were to unpack that, we are talking about not meeting even the basic caloric intake. And then we have stunting, we have wasting, and we have child mortality. If you look at all those, they relate to poverty. So indeed, addressing the first and the second SDGs will really help to address the hunger issues. And again, if we talk of how do we help address the hunger issues, the transformation, the food systems transformation that we are now talking about worldwide. If you look at the pathways highlighted and taking advantage of that as countries and strictly following and coming up with policies in line with the food systems pathways, you'll see that we can benefit a lot. Some of us who attended the last food system stock taking moment, we saw lessons, especially from the developed countries. And we can see how our friends are really taking these things seriously. We are talking of Africa not benefiting from trade, but I should also add that we are also not taking advantage and benefiting from some of these initiatives that are developed globally. We are well guided, but to what extent do we pick up lessons? To what extent do we learn? In the morning, one of the speakers referred to the system of coming up with good policies and indicating the government will. Yes, the will is there, but the implementation, we have very good documents, but what is the implementation? Where are we? We are 2 years before the 2025. And like Matthews earlier alluded to, in Zambia, yes, we are making some steady progress, but we are talking of reduction of stunting by 1% per annum. So if we have to achieve, we are right now at around 34% stunting rate. If we have to talk about ending zero stunting rates by 2030, according to the SDGs, then we have to triple that, or even 5 times for us to have zero stunting rates by 2030. So indeed, looking at transformation, and most of the times there are questions that are posed. What is really food systems transformation? Transforming, meaning doing things differently from the way we are doing now. When we had the development of the first NAIP, we were sharing initiatives and ideas across the countries. And if I remember our colleagues from Rwanda, if they're here, they can testify to that. They aligned their country goals around the NAIP, and even tying the contracts of the government staff, the civil servants, to the period of the NAIP, meaning that in 5 years, if there are targets that have been set, and if I don't achieve those targets in my area, after 5 years, it will determine whether my contract will be renewed or not. I think these are some of the real transformation we should be talking about, doing things differently. I think if we continue with the business as usual, we really don't see ourselves achieving the targets in 2 years, not even in 7 years for the 2030 development goals. I think for now I end here, moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now, before I get back to the panelists, and please get yourselves ready. We'll start with Liz, 1 minute final thoughts. But before that, I want to throw this to the audience. I just need 3 interventions. Please, no questions. Your thoughts. Hey. Okay. I said 3. My brother, why? 3 quick interventions or 4, or hands are up. At what you think is the way forward for Africa to end hunger and reduce poverty? What are the burning issues? If you have a question, they won't answer you. So please, we'll start at the back. The gentleman with the over there, then we'll come to you. Quick ones, please. Go straight to the point. Yeah, my brother, please get up quickly at the back and come and use a microphone here. All those who have questions, make sure you stand by a microphone. Did you?
Thank you. I'm Samuel Mtambo from the Hunger Project Zambia. I think for us is to see to it that if we have to end hunger and poverty in the country, in Africa, we need really to ensure that we localize food systems. Because what is happening now is we've so much taken a lot of things that are not local, and because of that, they are not sustainable in a way to our farmers, small-scale farmers especially. So if we can localize food systems where we can also start promoting indigenous crops, that is even friendly to our environment and our soils, we'll be able to end hunger and poverty. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. My name is Agnes Kirabo. A non-state actor from the region of the Wise from East Africa. Number one, in Africa, we are producing what we do not eat and we eat what we do not produce. Can we address that? Secondly, when you look at the indicators, it's good we are having this conversation, not 2 years to the end of the target, but also 2 years to recommitment. We adopted indicators that are outcome in nature. So you cannot talk about stunting when we are having a population that is in severe food insecurity. So we also need to look at the physical hunger, getting the real food into the mouths of the people, and then we look at its impact later on. You realize that we do not have a target on public stockings. All our country, many of our countries privatized their national food reserves. So for me, let us focus also now thinking about indicators on physical hunger, because we already have the indicators on the invisible hunger. Lastly, it is immoral. And we should quietly and shyly walk out of this room, accepting that it is immoral having people sleeping hungry in a continent of plenty. I submit.
Okay. I'm Emma Piri from Gender Division. My submission is that in order for us to end poverty, we need to abridge the data gaps that are existing. From the deliberations, it's like, it's not just Zambia that is suffering from not having data. It's like everyone is complaining about that. So for instance, in the last voluntary national reporting on SDGs, we're not able to report on SDG on no hunger because the statistics which were there were for a long time. This is because periodicity of the survey's data sources is also another challenge. So to abridge this, we need to think outside the box. If we can come together, we work together, harmonize all cooperating partners, we put monies in the basket to make data sources readily available in order for us to respond to the necessary SDGs. I submit.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, you have, yes, when we are talking about ending hunger, we have to think about African dignity. Ending hunger, it is our dignity. If we are thinking in this way, I think we could achieve something. If we look to ending hunger, increasing production, and we have to reduce the post-harvest losses.
to reduce the post-harvest losses. And then we are going to the issue of how can we reach the farmer with appropriate technologies and appropriate information. Thank you, at end users. Thank you.
If you don't have a microphone, I'll move on to someone else until you are ready. Yeah, please talk. Come and get a microphone. Speak, my sister, quickly.
For me, I feel that one of the things that has got to be done is to provide resources directly to the farmers. Because from the look of things, it's like all these things pass through too many hands. By the time it's reaching the farmer loses out. So can we have these resources directly provided to the farmer so that the farmer is able to utilize everything right in their hands? Information, fertilizers. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My issue is on the social protection. And as we are reviewing the success that we made towards the social protection in the African Union, and I like to think that putting it as an indicator and increasing the amount of social protection is showing us how much we are failing in terms of productivity, in terms of improving market access, in terms of improving production among ourselves. So if we're increasing social protection and see it as a measure of reducing hunger and having poverty, it is telling us that we are failing in terms of productivity, production, and access to markets. Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of post-harvest losses, which there are a lot of data that is showing that Africa is losing up to 50% of production in some cases in terms of post-harvest losses. So the advice is that the government should focus on community processing facilities, cottage processing facilities to be run by the cooperatives for comparative advantage and to also make sure we reduce food loss. And we must, within all we are doing, we must stop the elite capture of Africa agriculture. For instance, if you take how much African Development Bank is putting in our agriculture alone, you wonder where all those investments is going to. Thank you.
Cooperatives, my brother, quickly, then I'll come to you. Yeah, quickly.
Thank you so much.
Get ready.
Thank you so much, Moderator Bono Semani from Ministry of Fisheries and Livestock, Zambia. Now, sometimes one man said that complex situations sometimes are solved by simplistic solutions. What I want to say is this. The other solution that we can address is the issue of reducing on wastage. I'll give you a simple example. We are eating lunch. How many people left food on the table, on the plate? Many times we have side plates, we get more than what we can consume. And how much food do we waste? Even the water that we are drinking. At the end of the workshop, most of the bottles will be left half empty and the rest of the water will be thrown away. So what I'm saying is that we need a mental adjustment program. We need to work on our faculties at individual level. Then we'll be able to address this field.
Adjustment program. Margaret, you do have something to say. Okay, we had one last person there, and then I'll go on to the panelists. There was a lady. Yeah, please, quickly. The panelists can't.
Good afternoon. My name is Muntanga Mapani. I'm from the National Food and Nutrition Commission of Zambia. I wanted to put this on the table. If the issue of ending hunger is a moral issue, meaning is it a right or wrong issue? Who should take responsibility? Is it our governments or the experts in this room who have all the knowledge? So who should be sued for this issue? I thank you.
Just a moderator. Let's start with Liz. So move in this form and go. Your 1 minute intervention. No more than 1 minute, please.
Okay, if we want to reduce hunger, we must have zero food waste. It is everyone's business. It starts in the field as losses, and it goes through at the ports that's not effectively regulated. It's about SPS and food safety, the regulator, product recalls, where we have to write off food, and it ends on the table, where we do not understand portion size, and we dish up too much food that the body doesn't really all need for those who have ample food. Thank you.
Well, ending hunger and reducing poverty can be good business, profitable business. I think governments need to find a way to de-risk the investments that the private sector needs to make in it, because governments are not going to feed us. They are not going to make us rich. It's through the private sector that we'll be able to do this.
Thank you very much once again. I wanted to probably end by just responding to a question that you had asked. I think the last question that you asked, whether ending hunger is at the heart of the presidency in Zambia and whether Zambia is on the right track. So in response to this, because I felt that it was not adequately answered. So in response to this, my answer is yes. And I'll give my reasons. Reasons on, the president's inaugural, event. He made a commitment that he wants to achieve a Zambia where every Zambian can afford 3 decent meals. So you can underline the word decent. It should meet people's dietary needs. He also indicated that he doesn't want any Zambian to go to bed hungry. He has also challenged African leaders on many forums to rethink, the strategies, because he believes that Africa can feed itself. Other than that, Zambia has quite a lot of, things in place, such as, we have our food systems transformation strategies in place. Our government had removed, duty on just the importation of equipment so that, we can promote value addition to food. And also we've seen a lot of momentum coming through from, Cabinet Office, from the Ministry of Health, from the Vice President's office, just on the same matter. So I just thought I should answer that question, that yes, Zambia is on the right track in as far as ending hunger is concerned. Thank you.
Yes, government cannot do it alone. And I proved it by opening the doors of my Minister of Agriculture to the non-state actors. I see some of them here. They had to follow me as cadre focal point to sub-national levels. And it was an advantage to all of us. Win-win. Now I see oranges, tomatoes, pineapples, bananas, plantain, pawpaw, every day being dropped on the bare floor, because those are surplus things from the rural areas, and they come overnight. Some of them travel for 2 days from their own locations, and they are bringing to Abuja so that they can earn more money. But most of them waste. I feel like putting a juice factory, but I'm too old to start a business now. No. Unless I want to be like KFC. Yes. That's right. Now, I had mentioned the issue of aligning the NAIP with the NDP, the National Development Plans. She just mentioned that Rwanda did exactly that. They mainstreamed their NAIP into the National Development Plans. If the heads of governments adopted CADEP and said it's an agriculture-led development and industrialization of Africa, why would you say 10% of the budget should go to agriculture? Is it the production alone we are doing, or we are doing the whole value chain and presenting the final product to ourselves and the global community? We host 60% of the arable land in the whole planet, and we say we are hungry. Are we mad? What's wrong with you? You are the cause of the problem. Yes. So, okay, the last thing is the issue of closing our borders. I mean, African continent, and having a spokesman that will negotiate on trade We will need a spokesman for the whole of Africa that will negotiate on trade. We don't want bilateral talks between individual countries. They will go and be cheated in Europe. They will go to Asia and be cheated. They go to America, they are cheated. At the end of the day, we are the losers at the end of the day. Can't we have one spokesman on trade in Africa? Is it impossible? Is it difficult to do? And this social protection is like palliative. When you treat symptoms of disease without treating the real cause, that is what they call palliatives. They say, social protection, cash transfer program. In Brazil, they had an exit for all those that were on cash transfer program. They had an exit. And people who went through that program came out of poverty, and they had the numbers to show. We must begin to collect data on how many people are coming out instead of how many people are going down. More people are going to sleep hungry in an area that is blessed by God. What is wrong with you?
Okay, thank you very much. The last word from Rhoda, please. Nothing is wrong with us. It's just that we've gotten screwed because we didn't listen to the two blocks, the Monrovia block and the Casablanca block, because there were some people who thought that we shouldn't work together. But anyway, that's not, I don't want to go into politics. Rhoda, please.
All right, thank you very much. So I think one of the considerations or some factors that have not been highlighted that are leading to food insecurity is the population growth and also the change in consumption patterns. I think we've seen a trend where, well, the population growth is taking this kind of curve. Food production is still not that steep. So I think we need to look at that. And this is the reason that food systems transformation was thought of. And what I wouldn't do justice if I don't mention that in Zambia, as part of the food systems transformation, the country is also transforming the entire agriculture sector through the Comprehensive Agriculture Transformation Support Program, the CATSIP. Right now on paper, it's good. There's definitely political will. So we wait to see how the implementation will be. So there's need to align again the food systems transformation and the NAIP or vice versa, where as we are developing the NAIP 2, we see how we align that with the food systems transformation. I think that will help. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor. For me, I just have to one point. I want to plead to governments, to everybody who is here. Let us go to the countries and help strengthen the data and information systems. We will not be able to track our progress if the information systems are like this. I am pleading because we are having a lot of headaches with the data that is coming from the countries. My second point is I would like to touch on the conception that trade is a war. Trade is not a war. That is why the WHO is there to make sure that countries come together, they agree on the terms of trade. If terms of trade are good and efficient, they increase social welfare, social outcome. It's a basic economic principle. So it's all the reasons why countries keep on engaging in these trade negotiations. Trade is not a war. It's a win-win. It's a win-winner if it's well designed. So this is what I can say. Thank you.
And before I call in our officer on the governor, I know the governor is going to have something that you said the one question I want to ask you is this. How many of you have ever been hungry? I'm not talking about just missing your lunch or breakfast. The concept of being hungry. Have any of you ever been hungry? I doubt it. Even to the point where you are near death and you've heard that 50 miles away, they are supplying food and you are going to walk there because you have hope against hope that you would go and get that food. Think about it. The concept of putting rocks in a bowl just to deceive your child that food will soon be ready. The child goes to sleep. Think about it. It is very important that nutritionists must begin to rise up and do something about the wastage. My brother Sunday, you are not too old. Come up with innovative ideas that the mangoes, the pawpaw, the tomatoes, and everything that is getting rotten, that you'll get some wisdom to transform them into something. And I asked that one question deliberately because I heard the Zambian president make an innovative, impressive statement. And he said, his government is committed that no one would go hungry or have a decent meal. And having situated nutrition at the heart of the presidency, they are committed to doing that. How many African countries are committed to doing that? To address the problem of nutrition so that people who are not well placed can go to bed full. Think about it. The onus is upon you and I to wake up and bring about a change. However little it is, however small it is, within your circumference of influence, there is something that you can do. Go back and propagate that message. Begin to get a catchment audience and see if one person is hungry, we are all not well. And that is my personal take from this. It is very important to also note that the average age of our farmers is about 50, 55 years. What can they do when their energies have been sapped? And that is very important. The moral right. We are prone to diseases, the vicious cycle of poverty. It is morally incumbent on you and I to do something. Leave no stone unturned. Because we know that we can make the economic case, improving poverty, improving productivity, improving income, so that people can no longer be as poor as we see them. It is very important. Whatever we can do, improve irrigation in your area. And that is very important. There are more people, poor people. Are we really serious as a community? Please, don't look up to the government alone. What is it that you can do? If Africa wants to reduce poverty and end hunger, the onus is upon you and I. Let us do something about it. And as I would say, do something before you die. Leave a legacy for your circumference of influence, that whilst I was alive, I contributed in bringing the smiles onto the faces of people. I just want us to appreciate this wonderful panelist and our keynote speaker, and yourselves for the job well done. Please, we are done. Sorry, I took some time.
What a panel and what a moderator. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Now I know you more now.
We're about to close for the day, and I don't know what is your takeaway, your personal takeaway from a long day, but a very fruitful one. My immediate takeaway is something I have learned this afternoon. I studied during the time of structural adjustment policies. Now they were called SAPs. Now we've got mental adjustment program, MAP. So that's what we need if we are going to change the tide and end hunger and poverty. But someone will do much better than me, and I'm going to ask Professor Rukuni, are you still around? Professor Rukuni, being a professor, you can sum up this day in 5 minutes, can't you? 5 minutes. Hey, let's encourage him. Let's encourage him.
Okay, thank you. I'll try. Thank you so much, moderator. Microphone. Okay. So the top theme for today was Malabo Policy Learning Event, Success Stories and Policy Lessons on the intersection between nutrition, food security, and trade. And by the virtue of the number of gray hairs in my head, I declare the whole session a big success today. We started off in the morning with clear direction from our excellencies. That was straight. And my main take off on that one, because it was self-evident. But when Godfrey Baigo started talking about how the dances in Zambia are similar to the ones in Uganda and so on, I was just thinking, now the Africans are beginning to find out that we are similar. Our similarities are much more significant than our differences, which actually is one major success of CADEP, just bringing us together. It may not have been the original intention, but really bringing us together. We know each other better. We actually are integrating. So when it came to showcasing the success stories, you remember what happened. I had no one to, I had no panel, but I had a much better panel out there. The conversation was brilliant, and 20 years of CADEP has truly, so many things have happened that having a conversation on just what has worked, what hasn't worked, it's like tuning into your satellite television. There's more than 400 channels. You can tune up. If you want to tune to the one that tells you all the bad stories, you will find one. If you want to tune to the one that tells you good stories, there are many. So my take home there was pulling together these lessons. And I think there was some very good ideas around way forward, which I'll say a little bit more in a minute. The next session then was on boosting inter-regional trade in agricultural commodities and services. And the story there, the first thing that, I was having my senior moments as well, so I was tripping in and out, but somebody up here talked about trade as a lubricant for intra-regional trade. And as I listened to the conversation, it went on. So there's parts of that are kind of valid, and then parts which may not be as valid. And I will use my own country as an example to the point I wanted to just give you as a take home, because in the 1980s and 90s, Zimbabwe had this dubious recognition as bread basket of Southern Africa. And then Zimbabwe lost that status. And Zimbabweans still talk about it. And I say to them, you don't want to be bread basket of any region. It's no longer necessary, because every country now has the capacity to produce its own basic staple foods. You may want to be bread basket. Actually, no, you want to be maybe a supermarket. Produce manufactured goods and services rather than trade in basic grains, which quite honestly, Africa does not need. And I'll come back to that in a minute. I think it was explained that policies are not right. Infrastructure is also not quite right, because remember, we still have the original colonial infrastructure, which was nicely done to take things out of Africa and bring back manufactured goods and services. It was not intended to connect your village to the local economy. So a lot still has to be done there. The bottom line for me today, which I've also been asked to make some recommendations, which I will in a second, but I'll summarize it for you now. Before we rush to trade as an immediate solution to our food security situation, it's about managing structural transformation. It's about wishing to connect our small family farms and small medium scale enterprises to domestic manufacturing of these foods,
not just in the major cities, but in the villages and townships, so that when we trade amongst our nations, we're trading finished products. Why should we be trading maize and cassava? It doesn't make sense to me anyway. So the commitment to ending hunger and halving it by 2025, which was one of my kind of favorite commitment in Malabo, but I had one major issue with it. I can tell you that, because it was just, I'm only saying it now. I wouldn't have said it because that would have been heresy to say that commitment is wrong. But because in the conversation I had, hunger is a multifaceted, thing. It has many facets to it. And maybe even the better implementation of the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement could actually improve food security, et cetera, et cetera. But here's what the problem is. You can't end hunger and then have poverty. Why? Because poverty is the main cause of hunger. So you have to end poverty before you can end hunger. No, I won't say anymore, but it's that. So, yes, my recommendations at the end. Ending hunger may be regarded as a moral and economic imperative. However, the reality on the ground is that it is actually a political economy question. Why do I say so? Because if you look from the very first country which was able to trigger an agricultural revolution, which led to an industrial revolution 200 years ago, England, and that spread to Europe. If you look at the history of industrialization, which we don't do in Africa, I taught at university for a long time, and a lot of what I believe now I should have taught my students, I only taught them 10% of what I should have taught them, because I only found out the truth almost at my retirement stage. So here is what I mean by food at the center of political economy management in Africa. So go back to Europe, go back to England, the first one. Before the agricultural revolution in England, what were the cities like in England? There were death traps. London was full of poverty, disease, hunger. There was just, until the agricultural revolution. The agricultural revolution is what led to the creation of a modern industrial society. But before that could happen, you have to solve the food problem first. So here I'll talk slowly and quietly so that you understand what I'm saying. As long as you have cities in your country, and as long as even poor people face the risk of going hungry, that government can be toppled in days. Rural people will never topple a government. Urban people will topple a government if they go hungry just for a few days. So there's no clever government or political party which does not make sure that the urban people are going to be fed so that they don't go on the street. That fact alone means that until you solve the food problem, you will never have the right policies for growing agriculture and industrializing the nation. Solving the food problem means agricultural revolution. The agricultural revolution starts with a food revolution. It doesn't start with just producing all manner of raw materials for manufacturing, but first solve the food problem. When food productivity goes up, and this is where I think my elder brother, Martha Chipeta, was going towards. And I really like his mind on this. Once we talk about increasing productivity of small family farms, we immediately have to talk about linking that to manufacturing. You don't connect to manufacturing to tomorrow or next year. If that link doesn't happen right there and there, there's even no point in increasing productivity so that you take the material away. So back to England, increase in productivity, which came through clover and what have you, turnips, then the yields of wheat and so on go up. Immediately, food in cities is more readily available. And more importantly, the percentage of food in the household budget goes down in the cities. All of a sudden, cities are now going to start being able to manufacture more efficiently, quickly, because the food problem has been solved. So, yeah, we can moralize food, we can moralize it, and we can simply throw it out as something that we can do on the sidelines whilst we are trying to figure out what the economic transformation is. But I'll basically summarize it as follows. Every African country is in a middle income trap. There's no single African country which is fully industrialized. 0 out of 55 is not an accident. It's because we're undergoing an orthodox structural transformation, which can only be resolved by triggering a broad-based agricultural revolution, which starts with the food system revolution. So the way we have managed the NIPES all the way into the BR is quite commendable. All I would say in my recommendations, especially talking to my colleagues at AUD and NEPAD, is simply to simplify this whole process so that we can get to some of the things that Marva Shpeto was talking about, and make sure that some of the things, I think there was another, I think even Sunday said something very important when he was kind of commending Madam Esserin and Martin Waria, because they used to send experts to Nigeria to work with them. Well, one of my own assignments, this is the last story I'm going to tell you, I was sent to the Seychelles on one of those kinds of assignments. And the issue in the Seychelles, I don't know whether the Seychelles are here today, was that 2008, following that major financial crisis, which also led to the food crisis in the world, following that event, in the Seychelles, they were arguing about whether they should revive the Ministry of Agriculture that they'd abolished years earlier, because they didn't need it. They were a middle-income country, and they didn't need agriculture. It was all service-oriented because of the tourist industry. And all of a sudden, 2008, it was difficult to feed everyone in the Seychelles. And the question was, do we restart some of the things we closed, or we continue trying to get more tourists in? Unfortunately for them, then there was that volcano thing that stopped more tourists coming into the Seychelles. The long and the short is I went there for a week, and to be quite honest with you, my experience at the Seychelles, my experience with the South African case, where I've also been advising for a while, confirmed that no single African country is safe, cannot go into a fully orthodox, fully industrialized society without solving the food problem. So we need a robust theory of change moving forward beyond the Malabo era of CADAP. Productivity increases must be in terms of both the small farms and the small medium enterprises. We have to link agricultural productivity immediately to manufacturing in the villages and townships and the small towns, create that rural middle class and our domestic market for our own locally manufactured goods and services. Trade can then make more sense. Thank you very much. That's my recommended summary. Bye.
Wow, thank you, Prof. Prof has just rewritten the third CADIP commitment. It is no longer ending poverty and ending hunger and having poverty by 2025, but it is ending poverty so that you can end hunger by 2025 if it's, or whenever shortly after we can do that. So thank you very much, Prof. Okay, as we come to an end, it's a very important announcement. Each of our 4 days here are very, very important, but tomorrow is especially important because this is the commemoration of the Africa Day on Food and Nutrition Security. And the program tomorrow is meant to start by 9, but I want to plead with you. Please plan to be here by 8:45. Tomorrow we have a very high level dignitaries who are coming. The meeting will be addressed by the Vice President of Zambia, and the protocol and security will require that once he is inside the room, the doors will be closed. So if you don't want to spend the morning outside the meeting, please plan to be here by 8:45 so that by 9, when the dignitaries are meant to be seated and the doors are closed, you'll be on the right side of the door. And thank you very much. Today we started 1 hour late. We've finished only a few minutes later than planned. We promise you, if you keep time tomorrow, we will make sure that we end on time. So have a very good evening, and we will see you tomorrow morning. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
A better future. It's what every parent wants for their children. As a country, we're making great progress. Zambia is now one of the fastest growing economies in Africa. But to continue building for the future, we must address a challenge that is holding us back: childhood malnutrition and stunted growth.
Indeed, it is great for us all to come together to address one of the world's greatest challenges: ending hunger and eliminating all forms of malnutrition that include undernutrition, which manifests in wasting, stunting, and underweight. In addition, inadequate vitamins or minerals, overweight, obesity, and diet-related non-communicable diseases such